Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading video for Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024. Pretty sure that's when this will be coming out, which is about the week mark since the last time I did an AM reading video, so at least there's that. But all that being said, everything else about this is ridiculous. I'm filming way too late into the morning. I gotta get up and get to work pretty much immediately, and there's construction noise outside. I'm sure I won't be able to wait all of it out. And I have my blinds closed again because this is the time of day when the sun comes in really bright. But I wanted to get this out and, get this show, keep it on the road, keep it moving. And I do have some books to share. I was able to keep up my reading even when the snow days, or the days I got off for snow days concluded. So there's that, and let's get to it. So the first thing I do in these AM reading videos is I recap a short story in whatever literary magazine or collection I'm reading from, and I'm right now reading from this edition of American Short Fiction from summer 2023. And the story I have to talk about is The Naked Lady Saint by Mala Gaonkar. This is a story about a young woman who grew up in India, and her mother used to sing songs that were attributed to this woman called Akka Mahadevi, who was known as a 12th century sort of female revolutionary sort of Hindu leader. And this is something that made a little bit of an impression on the main character and sort of formed her story going forward. The main crux begins when she gets married to a man who is going to America to study, and she follows him. And at first she's like, oh, I'm just going to try to get some jobs on the side. I worked in advertising in India. Maybe I could continue that, but those dried up pretty quickly. So she ended up working for her husband's university, helping with translating Sanskrit, that sort of thing, and that ultimately led her to wanting to learn more about Mahadevi and get to translating her poetry, because she had such a affinity with this woman and reminded her of her mother. And, the sort of subtle backdrop is about the way women's personal desires and motivations are ultimately put on the back burner in their family lives for the sake of their husbands and their children, but also that things aren't quite in binary either. Like, for example, she starts arguing with a professor who wants her translations to be a little more, radical feminist in their nature, whereas the main character's like, no, Mahadevi, was both. She wanted reform, but she also was a religious person in her own right. So it's about trying to find that sense of nuance. So that's what she's going through, and ultimately it does end up with her husband leaving her, and just sort of that stereotypical story in the background. But I think just there's a lot in here that as I was reading it, I was just moved by this woman trying to find her place through this other woman, this 12th century woman whose works and contributions were generally unnoticed and unstudied, if you will, that everyone around her is like, why are you so obsessed with this random historical person? And she's finding a lot of meaning in it and trying to craft her own life. And as someone else, and as someone who personally finds a lot of meaning in, fiction and religion too, and in literary characters, I thought that it was really moving the way that it went down on the page and how it helped spark this woman's sense of interiority and meaning in her own life. Next, I'm continuing to read from the Best American Short Stories of 2023, as edited by the series editor Heidi Pitlor, and this specific edition is co-edited by Min-Jin Lee. This is one of my annual traditions that each January I go ahead and read the next collection of Bass to try to keep up with even more short stories, especially the buzziest ones, I suppose, out of US and Canadian magazines. And so I'm eking through them relatively slowly. I'm sure I'll continue to read from this collection throughout the rest of the month. But so far, my favorite story is Camp Emmeline by Taryn Bow, or possibly Bowie. Anyway, this story is about a family in the U.S. who their daughter slash sister Emmeline dies of medical complications, and they're able to sue the hospital, I guess, for wrongful death, for not, keeping the family well enough informed to keep her alive, that sort of thing. And they win that lawsuit and get a fair amount of money from the hospital. And they decide with that money they're going to open up a camp in the wilderness, and it'll be a camp for children with disabilities. But it's, one of those interesting things where, they don't know much, I don't think, about camping or the camp culture. And the place they bought was relatively beat up and banged up, and so they're doing this as a labor of love, but not necessarily that this leads into their natural skill set. And there happens to be this 30-something sort of loner man who comes with the property and is helping them kind of quietly to fix things up. And the way things work is, the parents are kind of off in their own world. They're very diligently putting themselves into the camp, but their two surviving children, are pretty distant from them at this point. I think, they're dealing with this grief and perhaps feeling a little cast off, and, dealing... and Lawn Boy, who the main character Libby calls this man, offers them sort of a safe place to, drink and talk and maybe go out on canoes and that sort of thing, and go adventuring through local islands and what have you. And obviously Libby is feeling some sort of attraction to this guy, and then they end up ultimately hiring, a counselor from in town to help with the kids. The first one, who shows up a bit early, kind of joins their little tribe so that this counselor and her brother can go off and do their own thing, and Libby can feel even more in her own world with Lawn Boy. And I just thought that the way that, it was a longer short story, so I felt like it gave enough for the world to be built up, and, we got to see them going through the prep for this camp and the beginning of the camp life, and how this grief and this project move about, and to see the intensity of Libby's relationship with Lawn Boy, and wonder, if it was going to end up being sexual or not, and how, that's a little bit tense because he's, technically an adult and she's a teenager. But, just the feelings of the grief and the relationships and this palpable setting really made it come really alive for me. So I was, again, really moved while reading it. Grief is perhaps a little bit of a theme for me this week, coming to the first novel that I finished this week, which is The Last Animal by Ramona Ausubel. This was one of the 2023 releases that stuck out to me the most, so I knew I wanted to read it this year. It might, in fact, end up making the BookTube Prize long list, because it's a contender for the BookTube Prize this year. So Robert's going to announce what made the long lists on February 1st, and I'll be excited to see if this one made it through. And I hope it does. I thought it was a really moving book. It is about this mother and her two teenage daughters. They recently lost their husband slash father in a driving accident in Italy, where he was working on a major project. He's this explorer and journalist, academic, who was researching ancient life in a specimen he called the Iceman, and had some of those actually sperm specimens, I believe it was, in his car with him. He, back in the day, happened to be the mother Jane's professor, and they kind of fell in love on a research trip and married, and it kind of upended her career for a little while because she was at home giving birth. But then, he is gone, and she decides to go back to grad school for paleontology, where she's joined a new professor and research group well, their major thing is, I think, looking for evidence of woolly mammoths, like in Siberia, and they're also trying to create genetically modified woolly mammoth embryos, for future use as a possible science experiment, except that Jane ends up flipping the switch a little bit and going rogue. She's at this science, gala with her two daughters because she doesn't want to leave them home alone. I don't know, the thing with the daughters is interesting. I'll get to that a little later. But anyway, I just wanted to quickly stay with the plot here and say they meet up with this woman called Helen, who's this slightly older, glamorous woman who lives in a castle in Italy with her husband, who they've used that space basically to have their own exotic zoo. And Helen is enticing Jane to maybe steal some of the embryos and just go ahead. She has an elephant in her zoo, and they could try to, impregnate the elephant and have a real woolly mammoth, like for the first time in thousands of years. And also in the background, I should say, when they were in Siberia, it just so happened that the two teenage daughters, Eve and Vera, unearthed a perfectly preserved woolly mammoth from about 5,000 years ago. So that's pretty exciting in and of itself, except it seems like almost immediately that discovery could be taken out of the hands of Jane and her daughters, and there's a lot of commentary in here about, sexism in the workplace and that sort of thing. So that's one major reason why Jane wants to do this. She's feeling, like her ambitions and her work aren't being appreciated, so why not go rogue and do something on her own for herself? But it's not a simple story of, the establishment and men are evil and all women are, sisters in arms. Helen actually has it's a little bit creepy a little bit. I mean, her whole affectation is a little bit creepy, that, she's the one with the money and with the exotic animals, and Jane's the one who, illegally stole embryos and that sort of thing. They're not quite sure what's going to happen with this experiment as it is. And we have to sort of see through the tensions of what actually does happen, because it's not smooth sailing. And so the whole story is mostly told from Vera's point of view, the younger daughter. I will say, I guess, and I think a couple people quirked their eyebrows at, the daughters, getting to travel with Jane everywhere she goes. Like, maybe it made sense with the husband if he had enough money, but it doesn't seem like Jane on her own has enough money. They're like barely making ends meet at home. And I don't know, am I supposed to believe that the university, paid for the girls to travel to Siberia and Iceland and all that? I mean, I get how Helen pays for the girls to come to Italy, but I don't know, it's a little convenient, but at the same time, it makes for really interesting family dynamics that Eve and Vera both seem very teenage, but also obviously have a very unique globe-trotting lifestyle where they've been to so many different countries, and they've seen so many different types of excavations and research about, the ancient past and animals alive today, that sort of thing. So they're a little bit out of tune with kids growing up, and then also there's this weird, their grief about their father as well. And their mother is kind of distant from them too. Like, Jane is resentful about her husband dying, is resentful about having to juggle being a mother and a career woman, and so it makes her seem distant from them, which is almost ironic, as she's trying to bring a baby mammoth into the world that she's almost mothering in a way. So Vera's, like, as a character, she's, she has this rich sense of interiority about, her desire to be loved by her mother and her sister, who are kind of going in their own directions. And Eve has her own sense of rebellion and anger about what's going on. But everything is really nuanced, and you can tell how these people really care about each other, but at the same time, Vera, is sort of the quietly suffering one who secretly wants a more normal life. But the whole story isn't about dramatics in that way, other than, bringing ancient animals back to life. It's really more about, trying to become a family again and trying to find yourself. And it's just a weird juxtaposition with something that's so, unusual. I mean, personally, I think that it seems to me that the science seems accurate. Ausubel has some credits to give him the acknowledgments of that, like, she at least did some research into this. But of course, I'm not an expert. So, other than knowing that it was very rare to either find a fully intact mammoth body or bring a mammoth to life. These are both very rare things, but at the same time, it was interesting to bring together such a I guess, a unique story about family and belonging and grief. The next book I finished keeps with the animal theme, at least. This is An Immense World by Yong, which I listened to on audio. And the main reason I wanted to listen to this, especially in January, is because it won the BookTube prize for nonfiction last year. So I thought I should give it a go because it was one of the titles I didn't read for my official judging last year. And my official judging for this year will hopefully begin next month if I am able to be a judge of something. We'll have to see. This novel is very much about the animal kingdom and trying to go through the ways that animals sense the world in ways that we as humans don't, and in most of history we haven't even thought to think that animals might, see things differently than we do. Seeing is our major, sensory detail for most of us, so it's what we assume the rest of animals, experience life through, but, usually, oftentimes they don't, and Yong goes through so many details about how different animals not only see things differently, like through colors or infrared, but also how they smell and they hear and they experience touch and pain and electrocurrents and all sorts of things. They experience the world so differently than we do, but it's still so real. And, this is still science on the cutting edge, and so sometimes some of his hypotheses are a little bit warbly, like we're just still not completely sure yet, but throughout the book he has a variety of interviews with people working with different animals in different capacities, and he references so many animals and their different capacities to experience the world, and it's really overwhelming. I mean, it's one of those things where, I get why this is fascinating to some people, and it's not even like stuffily written. It's compelling, but I think it was interesting. Interesting analogy would be, that we don't really, we didn't stop and we can't completely understand how animals perceive the world. And for me, in a way, it's like how different people perceive stories, and maybe people more inclined toward nature writing and science writing, would latch onto this more easily. Like, I found it very difficult to keep all these details in my head because I'm a narrative reader, and there's not really necessarily a narrative. I mean, he does tie things together, and every chapter kind of leads into the next one. But, it's, I guess I'm human-centric in a way, like emotion and interiority is my sort of natural perception of the world, I feel like. And there aren't characters who persist through this necessarily, other than Yong himself, as he, globetrots around the world to different places and talks to different people and looks at different animals. So it's still, in large part, a bunch of facts that are thrown at you. Fascinating facts, but not a narrative in the way that I'm usually drawn into narratives. So I did find it more challenging than I hoped I would, but I wonder how much of that's a bias thing. And I mean, I feel like I say similar things about most of the science and nature reading that I do in nonfiction. I would say that this style of writing is a lot more engaging, and like, obviously Yong understands the natural world, but he also understands how to talk to lay people about the natural world. So that's why so many readers on BookTube have really fallen hard for this book. So I get that, but for me, I do feel like there's some sort of distance that I can't quite cross, that I can't quite connect to it as much as I hoped I would be able to, but hopefully some of the factoids will stick with me. I'll admit that I've been looking a lot at dogs as I've been seeing people walk them as I've been outside, and I've been thinking about how they're sniffing around and hoping that their humans give them enough time to sniff around, because that's their primary way of, discovering their world. So, let dogs be dogs, everyone. And the final book I'll talk about right here and now is On Division by Goldie Goldboom, which I've just started. I'm just a few pages into. This was the book I chose for my page 112 tag a couple of weeks ago, where I pit books on my physical unread shelves against each other by reading and reviewing page 112, which I'm not to yet. But anyway, this is a story that takes place like roughly at the turn of the century in Brooklyn. The main character is a 50-something grandmother and almost great-grandmother from a Hasidic family who finds herself very improbably pregnant again. well past the time she figured she'd be done with this, and she already has several kids. And you know, she thinks you know it's kind of, you know, her time's up. This is not what she was expecting to do at this point in her life, but because of, you know, her community's beliefs about abortion and life and what have you, she's you know, has no choice basically. So she has to, you know, try to carry the baby to term, or the babies as it's twins to term. We're still very much in the beginning where we're like learning about her and her family. She, you know, she hasn't told her husband yet. Presumably she will soon enough. You know, she's dealing with, she just had her daughters get married just the day before she went in for an appointment with the midwife. And the marriage was not quite to her taste because her son had died a while back, like 4 years ago. We don't know exactly why, but it lowered their standing in the community. So the match for her daughter was not the type of person Suri really wanted. You know, this Hasidic community is often very strict about how people present themselves, and sort of the reputation that families have within the community for, you know, staying within the tradition and doing things the way that everyone else does them. So when people are a little bit off, that's actually a big thing. So that's where I am right now. So, you know, I'm just trying to get to know this character and get to know her dilemma, and I'll report back next week with how everything goes. So that about covers it for me now. I think I'll just link to my page 112 tag video down below in case you'd want to know more about On Division or any of the other 2 books I picked out for this month, but didn't put on my TBR. I have a bunch on my TBR as it is, a bunch I still want to squeeze in through the rest of the month, so hopefully I can get it done. I'm pretty excited. I was able to finish 2 whole books this week, so yeah, keep it rolling, keep it rolling. And I also have a bunch of booktube content I'd like to squeeze into the end of the month. I think I'll start with the National Jewish Book Awards. I believe they will be announced, the winners and finalists, tomorrow as I'm posting this, on Wednesday. So hopefully I'll very quickly be able to gather my thoughts about the books that speak out to me the most, the ones that interest me the most. So stay tuned. Or if the Jewish Book Council doesn't get that list out in time and they push back that date, maybe I'll go ahead and finally get to my author's backlist video for this project I did in December, where I read 3 of my remaining 3 of Geraldine Brooks's fiction novels, and I wanted to go ahead and, you know, review them here, and now, you know, it's been almost a month since I've read them, so I should go ahead and do that too. I'm hoping to get to both of those videos very soon. So I hope you are all doing well with what you are hoping to get to, reading and otherwise. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.